Hi friends of Petropolis TV, welcome to our new video. Today we've got a hilarious compilation of funny cats and dogs that will make you laugh out loud. From the cutest puppies to the funniest mishaps, get ready to see your furry friends in unbelievable situations. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss one of our videos. Let's dive right into the laughs.
Ready, set, go!
When life gives you melons, make it a perfect snack. This pup just got the funniest tummy surprise ever. When the garden hose becomes the ultimate dog toy. The ultimate grass slide champion. This cat's ready for the summer fruit festival. Bless you, tiny sneeze machine. Furry chaos on the living room floor.
Hey!
Gym buddies working out together. This cat's beauty routine is next level. This pup is all about that intellectual life. This pup knows how to beat the summer heat. Instant refreshment, doggy style. Say cheese, or should I say woof. Someone's got a taste for fashion. Proving that even natural enemies can enjoy a sunny day. Waiting for the green light to travel. Just another day in the life of a cool cat. Just checking in on the neighborhood. Who needs a gardener when you have a helpful pup?
While there is still no word on a cure for the virus, government officials say the virus is not...
Budget spa day success.
Help me!
Don't mess with the little boss. From playful to painful in seconds.
While there is still no word on a cure for the virus, government officials report the virus is not airborne, but can be transferred through
When the tabletop becomes the play zone,
fluids. The virus seems to be making
Oh no!
chasing for some kitty hugs. Dachshund Marathon, who will win? Cat's new job, bathroom attendant. When curiosity gets you stuck. Move over, dance stars. Here comes the pup. No one messes with this pup's meal. Paws at dawn, the ultimate face-off. When kitty fashion meets mischief. Gymnastics champion, feline edition. Puppy perplexed by his mirror twin. Life's good with a comfy couch and a ball. Who's the cutest baby in the house? Double trouble in the splash zone. When the pup takes over the car concert. Unexpected ear cleaning service. TV time with the feline critic.
Huh?
Sky's the limit for this high-flying dog. Unexpected kitty visitor. The ultimate game of hide and squeak. Guarding his favorite person fiercely. Priorities: snacks first, room later. Refreshing drink on a hot day. Who knew a tiny light could be so fun? Who knew a tiny light could be so fun?
Hey!
Bathroom breaks and book breaks combined. Sometimes even the cutest have rough days. The struggle is real with that collar. Riding in style with their best friend. Who needs a cage when you have a pillow? Spinning into pure joy. Meat on a stick, a feline feast. Happy laps around the best person ever.
Oh my God!
Can't resist that meaty temptation.
Huh?
This cat's ready for a new home. Defending the house from the noisy monster. That Panzerato looks too tempting.
Oh no! Oh no!
Who needs a pacifier when you're this cute? Best friends stick together even on the beach. Human gas attack, dog evacuates. The wall doesn't taste that good, buddy. Pretty in pink and full of attitude. When life gives you lemons, make a cat pucker. Full immersion feeding mode. Communicating with pure canine cuteness. Wildlife taking action against pollution. Jumping skills need some work. First the bop, then the snuggle. Dreaming of epic adventures. Puppy eyes that could melt anyone. Soda Pop Challenge, Cat Edition. Breaking hearts with that teary gaze. Keeping the house spotless, one cabinet at a time. Tail tasting, a new doggy hobby. Freedom! Not in the mood for belly rubs today. Kitten's quest for an unlikely buddy. When your cat channels its inner robot.
Help me!
Indoor parkour, doggy edition. Popcorn pup in snack heaven. Morning meows are the sweetest. A possum balloon adventure. When the toilet becomes a hydration station. Independent kitty prefers no pets. Who needs toys when you have a playful human? Discovering new flavors on the wall. Pup massage therapy in session. Getting ready for the perfect performance. Determined to conquer the water stream. Leash twister champion. Caught in the birdcage, but staying hydrated.
Ready?
Not a fan
Set.
of the futuristic
Go.
flyer. Who needs a sausage when you have a wagging tail? This curious canine is making sure he knows what's happening next door. Neighborhood watch in full effect. Who knew a cookie could make a dog this excited? Paws and hands in perfect harmony. Determined jumper, but the table wins this round. Reaching for that tasty chicken morsel. Shiba Inu's detour to avoid the fierce feline. Making sure every grain is in place. Those eyes and that meow say it all. Making sure everyone notices his contribution. Who needs a pool when you have a bucket? Someone's got the sneezes today. Both cat and dog can't resist the sound. Relaxing swim for this happy pup. A little teamwork at dinner time. In this part of the video, I'm going to share some funny stories about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. These are events that have happened over the past few years that have made me laugh so hard. Let's start with the first story. It was a Sunday afternoon and I decided it was the perfect time to give them a nice bath. I had everything ready, warm water in the tub, cat shampoo, and towels. Everything seemed set. But of course, Floki and Ludi had a different idea. As soon as I put Floki in the tub, chaos erupted. He leapt out like a rocket, splashing water everywhere. I tried to catch him, but it was useless. Meanwhile, Ludi was watching everything from the door with a look that clearly said, "You'll never get me." So there I was, running around the house with a dripping wet Floki, trying to keep him from hiding under the bed or climbing the curtains. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, Ludi decided to join the fun. He must have thought his buddy was in trouble because he came charging in, and suddenly I had two wet, frantic cats to deal with. Water was everywhere, on the walls, on the floor, even on the ceiling. I was soaked, the bathroom was a mess, and Floki and Ludi were looking at me like I was the one causing all the trouble. After what felt like an eternity, I finally managed to get both cats clean. They were not happy, but they looked so funny all fluffed up and clean. I wrapped them in towels and they sat there sulking, plotting their revenge. Despite the chaos, it was an unforgettable day and gave me one of the best laughs. Bath time might not be their favorite, but it's definitely one of the most entertaining times for me. I have another hilarious story to share about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. This one takes place a couple of years ago during a particularly stormy night. I was sitting on the couch enjoying a cup of tea when I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. It sounded like something was moving around, but I couldn't quite place it. Naturally, I decided to investigate. As I walked into the kitchen, I saw Floki perched on top of the refrigerator, staring intently at something on the floor. Ludi was crouched behind a chair, his eyes wide and focused. Curious, I looked around and finally spotted the source of their fascination. A tiny mouse had somehow found its way into the house. Now, Floki and Ludi are usually quite lazy. They prefer lounging around and napping to any sort of physical activity, but this mouse had ignited a primal hunting instinct in them. Floki leapt down from the fridge with surprising grace and joined Ludi in the hunt. What followed was a chaotic ballet of cats and mouse, with me as the bewildered audience. The mouse darted under the table and Floki and Ludi went after it, knocking over chairs and sending a vase crashing to the floor. I tried to intervene, but every time I got close, the mouse would change direction and the chase would start anew. At one point, the mouse ran up the curtains and Floki attempted to follow, resulting in him dangling precariously halfway up before falling back to the floor with an indignant meow. Ludi, on the other hand, decided to employ a different tactic. He climbed onto the counter and began swatting at the mouse from above. His paw movements were quick and precise, but the mouse was faster. It zigzagged around the kitchen, evading every swipe with impressive agility. I couldn't help but laugh at the scene unfolding before me. Two cats, usually so composed, now completely out of their element. After what felt like an eternity, the mouse made a break for the living room. Floki and Ludi, determined not to let their prey escape, followed with renewed vigor. The chase continued, with the mouse weaving through furniture and the cats hot on its tail. I followed closely behind, trying to keep up and avoid getting caught in the fray. Finally, the mouse found refuge behind the couch. Floki and Ludi, exhausted but relentless, stared at the gap, tails twitching in anticipation. I took this opportunity to gently coax the mouse into a small box using a piece of cheese. Once it was safely inside, I carried it outside and released it into the garden, far away from the house. Floki and Ludi were not pleased with the outcome. They sulked for the rest of the evening, clearly disappointed that their grand hunt had ended without a catch. But for me, it was one of the funniest and most memorable nights with them. Watching them transform from lazy loungers to fierce hunters and then back to their usual selves was priceless. That stormy night turned into an unexpected adventure, reminding me once again of the joy and laughter Floki and Ludi bring into my life. Whether they're causing chaos or simply being their adorable selves, they always manage to keep things interesting. I've got another hilarious story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi, and this one is an epic adventure that unfolded just last summer. It all started on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I decided to do some gardening and left the back door open so Floki and Ludi could enjoy the warm weather too. They love exploring the backyard, chasing bugs, and basking in the sun, so I thought it would be a perfect day for all of us. As I was pulling weeds and planting flowers, I noticed Floki and Ludi acting a bit more curious than usual. They were both staring intently at the big oak tree in the corner of the yard. Floki, always the more daring of the two, decided to investigate first. He trotted over to the tree, sniffing around the base. Ludi followed closely behind, clearly intrigued by whatever had caught Floki's attention. Suddenly, Floki began to climb the tree. Now, Floki is not exactly the most graceful cat when it comes to climbing, so watching him awkwardly scramble up the trunk was both amusing and a bit concerning. Ludi, not wanting to be left out, started climbing right after him. I watched in amazement as both cats made their way higher and higher into the branches. At first, I thought they were just having a bit of fun, but then I heard it. A faint, persistent chirping. I realized there must be a bird's nest somewhere up in the tree, and Floki and Ludi had taken an interest in it. Worried for the safety of both the birds and my adventurous cats, I decided to intervene. I called out to them, hoping to coax them down. Floki, Ludi, come on guys, let's get back to the ground. But as you can imagine, they completely ignored me. Instead, they continued their climb, determined to reach the source of the chirping. After a few minutes of fruitless calling, I realized I'd have to take more drastic measures. I grabbed a ladder from the garage and set it up against the tree. As I started to climb, I couldn't help but think about how ridiculous the situation was. Here I was, chasing after two cats who were chasing after birds, all while balancing precariously on a ladder. When I reached the first set of branches, I saw Floki and Ludi perched side by side, staring at a small nest filled with baby birds. The mother bird was nowhere in sight, likely scared off by the commotion. Floki was reaching out with his paw, trying to touch the nest, while Ludi looked on with wide, fascinated eyes. I carefully maneuvered closer, trying not to startle them. Hey Floki, Ludi, let's not scare the birds, okay? Come on, let's go back down. To my surprise, Ludi actually turned around and started making his way down the tree. Floki, however, was not so easily convinced. He was fixated on the nest, seemingly oblivious to my presence. Just as I was about to reach out and grab Floki, he lost his footing and slipped. My heart skipped a beat as I watched him fall, but luckily he landed on a lower branch, unhurt but clearly startled. Taking advantage of his momentary disorientation, I scooped him up and carefully made my way back down the ladder. Back on the ground, Ludi was already exploring the garden again, seemingly unfazed by the whole ordeal. Floki, on the other hand, was clearly annoyed at being interrupted. He gave me a disgruntled look and then wandered off to find something else to do. I sighed in relief, hoping that was the end of their tree climbing adventures for the day, but as any cat owner knows, things are never that simple. Later that afternoon, I heard more chirping, this time much closer. I looked around and found Floki and Ludi sitting on the back porch, staring at a small fluffy chick that had somehow fallen out of the nest. The poor little thing was cheeping loudly, clearly in distress. Floki and Ludi were both watching it intently, but to my surprise, they didn't try to pounce. Instead, they seemed more curious than predatory, as if they were trying to figure out what this tiny creature was. I quickly scooped up the chick and placed it in a small box with some soft cloth. I knew I needed to get it back to its nest, but the thought of climbing that tree again wasn't exactly appealing, so I decided to call a local wildlife rescue for advice. They instructed me on how to safely return the chick to its nest without disturbing the other birds too much. Armed with this new knowledge, I climbed the ladder once more, chick in hand. Floki and Ludi watched from below, probably wondering what their human was up to now. Carefully, I placed the chick back in the nest, making sure it was secure. The mother bird soon returned, and I climbed back down, feeling a sense of accomplishment. As I reached the ground, Floki and Ludi were waiting for me, their eyes wide with curiosity. I sat down on the porch, exhausted but happy that the chick was safe. Floki jumped into my lap, purring contentedly, while Ludi rubbed against my legs, clearly pleased with the day's events. That day was a perfect reminder of the unpredictable and often hilarious nature of living with cats. Whether they're climbing trees, chasing birds, or just being their curious selves, Floki and Ludi always manage to turn an ordinary day into an unforgettable adventure. And as much as they drive me crazy sometimes, I wouldn't trade these moments for anything. I have another funny and slightly chaotic story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. This one happened last winter, during a particularly snowy day that turned our backyard into a winter wonderland. It all started when I decided to take advantage of the beautiful snowfall and build a snowman in the backyard. I bundled up in my warmest clothes, grabbed my gloves, and headed outside. Of course, Floki and Ludi were immediately curious about what I was doing and followed me out into the cold, fluffy snow. They were a bit hesitant at first, gingerly stepping into the unfamiliar white stuff, but their curiosity quickly got the better of them. I began rolling a large snowball to create the base of the snowman, and Floki and Ludi watched intently. Floki, always the more adventurous one, decided to investigate the snowball. He pounced on it only to be surprised when it didn't move. He tried again, this time digging his paws into the snowball, and eventually he started rolling it along with me. Ludi, seeing his brother having fun, joined in as well. Soon enough, both cats were chasing the snowball as I rolled it around the yard. Once the base of the snowman was complete, I started working on the middle section. Floki and Ludi, however, had other ideas. They thought the snowball rolling was a game and kept trying to push it with their paws, making it a bit difficult for me to get the snowman done. I couldn't help but laugh at their antics, even though they were slowing down my progress. Eventually, I managed to get the snowman's body and head in place. I found a couple of sticks for arms, a carrot for the nose, and some pebbles for the eyes and mouth. Floki and Ludi watched me with great interest, sitting a few feet away in the snow, their tails flicking back and forth. Once the snowman was complete, I stood back to admire our handiwork. Just then, Floki decided that the snowman needed a closer inspection. He jumped up and swatted at one of the stick arms, which wobbled precariously. Ludi, not wanting to be left out, joined in and started batting at the other arm. Before I knew it, the snowman was starting to look a bit lopsided. I tried to shoo the cats away, but they were having too much fun to listen. Things took a turn for the hilarious when Floki, in his excitement, accidentally knocked the carrot nose off the snowman. The carrot landed in the snow a few feet away, and both cats immediately pounced on it. They started batting the carrot back and forth between them like a game of feline soccer. I couldn't stop laughing as I watched my cats play with the snowman's nose. In the midst of this commotion, I suddenly had an idea. I went back inside and grabbed a few more carrots, thinking it would be fun to see how Floki and Ludi would react. When I returned, I tossed a carrot into the snow, and both cats immediately chased after it. For the next half hour, I threw carrots, and Floki and Ludi would take turns chasing, pouncing, and batting them around the yard. It was like their own little Winter Olympics. Eventually, the excitement wore them out. Floki flopped down in the snow, panting slightly, while Ludi found a sunny spot and curled up to rest. I gathered up the remaining carrots and went back to the snowman, reattaching the nose and fixing the arms. The snowman looked a bit worse for wear after the cat's playful assault, but it had certainly been a fun afternoon. As I stood there, admiring the now slightly crooked snowman, I felt a sudden weight on my shoulder. Floki had jumped up onto the porch railing and then onto me, his usual way of demanding attention. I picked him up and carried him inside, with Ludi following close behind. We all settled down in the living room, where I made myself a hot cup of cocoa and gave the cats their favorite treats. Watching Floki and Ludi snuggled up together, purring contentedly, I couldn't help but smile. That snowy afternoon had turned into one of the most memorable days I've ever had with my furry companions. Their playful spirits and endless curiosity always managed to brighten even the coldest of days. Later that evening, as I looked out the window at our slightly askew snowman, I realized that the best part of having Floki and Ludi in my life is the joy and laughter they bring every single day. Whether we're building snowmen, chasing carrots, or just lounging around the house, every moment with them is filled with love and happiness. So if you ever find yourself on a snowy day, I highly recommend building a snowman and letting your cats join in on the fun. You never know what kind of delightful chaos might ensue, but one thing's for sure, it will be a day you'll never forget. I've got another hilarious and heartwarming story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. This one took place last spring, during a time when the flowers were blooming and the days were getting longer and warmer. It all began one Saturday morning. I decided to do some spring cleaning and organize the attic, which had turned into a bit of a storage jungle over the years. I climbed up the ladder, opened the creaky attic door, and started sorting through boxes of old clothes, holiday decorations, and forgotten treasures. Floki and Ludi, naturally curious, followed me up the ladder and began exploring the attic, sniffing around and investigating every nook and cranny. While I was busy sorting through a box of old photo albums, I heard a commotion coming from the far corner of the attic. I turned around to see Floki and Ludi crouched low to the ground, their eyes fixed on something behind an old chest. Intrigued, I walked over to see what had captured their attention. As I got closer, I realized there was a small mouse peeking out from behind the chest. Before I could react, Floki pounced. The mouse darted out from its hiding spot and Floki chased after it, knocking over a stack of boxes in the process. Ludi, not wanting to be left out, joined the chase, and soon the attic was filled with the sounds of scurrying feet and the rustling of boxes. I watched in amusement as my two cats, usually so calm and composed, turned into fierce hunters determined to catch the little intruder. The mouse, proving to be quite agile, managed to evade Floki and Ludi, weaving through the clutter and finding new hiding spots. I decided to join in the effort to catch the mouse, not wanting it to make a permanent home in our attic. Armed with a small container and a piece of cheese, I tried to lure the mouse into the open. As the chase continued, Floki suddenly leapt onto a high shelf, knocking over a box filled with old costumes. The contents spilled onto the floor, and among them was an old Halloween costume of a mouse. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Floki, now entangled in the costume, looked both confused and adorable. Ludi, distracted by his brother's predicament, momentarily forgot about the real mouse and started pawing at the costume. Taking advantage of the brief respite, the mouse scurried towards the attic door. I quickly moved to block its path, but the mouse was too quick. It darted past me and down the ladder with Floki and Ludi in hot pursuit. I followed them down, trying to keep up with the chaos that had now moved to the main part of the house. The mouse led us on a wild chase through the living room, kitchen, and hallway. Floki and Ludi were relentless, their hunting instincts fully engaged. At one point, the mouse ran under the couch, and Floki, ever the determined hunter, squeezed himself underneath in an attempt to catch it. Ludi, meanwhile, stood guard on top of the couch, ready to pounce if the mouse reappeared. I decided to take a different approach. Remembering a small, humane mousetrap I had stored away, I quickly retrieved it and set it up in the kitchen, baited with a bit of peanut butter. I hoped the mouse would be attracted to the scent and find its way into the trap. Meanwhile, Floki and Ludi continued their watchful vigil, eyes darting around as they tracked every movement. After what felt like an eternity, the mouse finally emerged from its hiding spot and made its way towards the kitchen. I held my breath, watching as it cautiously approached the trap. Floki and Ludi, sensing the end of the chase was near, stayed perfectly still, their tails twitching in anticipation. The mouse entered the trap, and I quickly closed the door, successfully capturing it. Floki and Ludi, now realizing the hunt was over, approached the trap with a mix of curiosity and disappointment. I carefully picked up the trap and took it outside, releasing the mouse into the garden far away from the house. Back inside, Floki and Ludi seemed to be in high spirits, their adventure clearly having provided them with a good deal of excitement. They followed me back up to the attic as I continued my spring cleaning. This time, however, they seemed content to simply watch from a distance, occasionally batting at stray pieces of string or chasing dust motes in the sunlight. As the day wore on and the attic began to look more organized, I couldn't help but smile at the memory of the morning's events. Floki and Ludi had turned what could have been a mundane chore into a delightful and amusing adventure. Their playful spirits and boundless curiosity never failed to bring joy and laughter into my life. Later that evening, as I sat on the couch with Floki and Ludi curled up beside me, I reflected on how lucky I was to have such wonderful companions. Their antics, whether chasing a mouse or simply exploring their surroundings, always managed to brighten my day, and while I hoped we wouldn't have any more unexpected visitors in the attic, I knew that whatever happened, Floki and Ludi would be there to turn it into a memorable experience. So here's to Floki and Ludi, the dynamic duo who never fail to make life interesting. Whether they're on the hunt for a mouse or just enjoying a lazy afternoon in the sun, they always manage to bring a smile to my face, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I've got another funny and unforgettable story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. This one happened just a few months ago, and it involves a particularly adventurous day when I decided to try baking for the first time. It was a lazy Saturday afternoon, and I thought it would be fun to bake some cookies from scratch. I gathered all the ingredients and set them out on the kitchen counter. Floki and Ludi, as always, were curious about what I was up to and followed me into the kitchen. They sat on the floor, watching my every move with their big inquisitive eyes. As I started mixing the ingredients, Floki jumped up onto the counter to get a closer look. I tried to shoo him away, but he was determined to supervise my baking efforts. Ludi, seeing Floki's boldness, decided to join in and leapt onto the counter as well. Now I had two furry assistants who were more interested in playing with the measuring cups and sniffing the flour than actually helping. I managed to get the dough mixed and rolled out without too much trouble, despite Floki and Ludi's constant interruptions. But things took a turn for the chaotic when I began cutting out the cookie shapes. Floki decided that the rolling pin was his new favorite toy and started batting it around. Ludi, not to be outdone, discovered the bag of flour and promptly knocked it over, covering himself and the counter in a fine white powder. I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of Ludi, now looking like a little ghost cat with flour all over his fur. Floki, seeing his brother's new look, pounced on him and the two began wrestling right there on the counter, sending puffs of flour into the air with each playful swipe. I decided to take a break from baking and clean up the mess. I carefully lifted Floki and Ludi off the counter and placed them on the floor, then grabbed a damp cloth to wipe down the flour-covered surfaces. The cats, now slightly disappointed that their fun had been interrupted, sat on the floor and watched as I cleaned. With the kitchen somewhat back in order, I returned to my cookies. I cut out the shapes and placed them on a baking sheet, then popped them into the oven. I set the timer and turned my attention back to Floki and Ludi, who had now discovered a new source of entertainment: the dough scraps left on the counter. Floki was pawing at a small piece of dough, while Ludi was trying to reach a particularly stubborn bit that had stuck to the edge of the counter. I decided to let them have their fun, figuring it was harmless enough. I sat down at the kitchen table to keep an eye on them and wait for the cookies to bake. As I watched them play, I noticed Floki getting more and more interested in the oven. The warmth and the smell of the baking cookies seemed to captivate him. He jumped up onto the open oven door and peered inside, his little nose twitching with curiosity. Ludi, ever the copycat, followed suit and joined Floki on the oven door. Worried that they might get too close to the hot oven, I gently shooed them away and closed the door. They sat on the floor, staring at the oven with a mixture of fascination and confusion. I couldn't help but laugh at their antics. They were so determined to be involved in every part of the baking process. When the timer finally went off, I opened the oven to reveal a tray of perfectly golden cookies. The smell was heavenly, and I couldn't wait to try one. But first, I had to let them cool. I placed the tray on the counter and turned to find Floki and Ludi, who were now sitting by their food bowls, clearly expecting a treat for all their help. I decided to give them a small taste of what they had been so curious about. I broke off a tiny piece of cookie and placed it on the floor in front of them. They sniffed it cautiously, then began nibbling at it with delight. Their approval was all the confirmation I needed that my first attempt at baking had been a success. As I sat down with a plate of cookies and a cup of tea, Floki and Ludi curled up next to me, purring contentedly. They had clearly enjoyed the day's adventure as much as I had. It was one of those moments that reminded me just how much joy and laughter these two furry companions bring into my life. That afternoon turned into a memorable experience, filled with laughter and a little bit of chaos, thanks to Floki and Ludi. Their curiosity and playful nature turned a simple baking session into an unforgettable adventure, and while my kitchen might have ended up a bit messier than I had planned, the joy and companionship they provided were more than worth it. So if you ever decide to try baking with your pets around, be prepared for a bit of chaos, but also a lot of fun. Floki and Ludi proved that sometimes the best moments are the unexpected ones, filled with laughter, love, and a little bit of flour. I have another amusing and somewhat chaotic story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. This adventure happened last autumn during a particularly crisp and windy day that had everyone feeling a bit more lively than usual. It was a Sunday morning, and I had decided to clean out the garage, which had become a bit of a mess over the summer. I opened the garage door to let in some fresh air and natural light while I worked. As always, Floki and Ludi were curious about what I was doing and decided to join me in the garage. As I started sorting through the various boxes and tools, Floki and Ludi began their own exploration. Floki, being the more adventurous of the two, immediately started climbing on top of the stacked boxes, while Ludi opted to investigate the lower shelves and corners. I was keeping an eye on them, but they seemed to be behaving themselves, so I continued with my task. About an hour into my cleaning, I heard a strange noise coming from behind a stack of boxes. I turned around to see Floki, who had managed to knock over a can of paint. Fortunately, the lid was on tightly, so no paint spilled, but the can made a loud clatter as it hit the floor. Ludi, startled by the noise, jumped up and knocked over a small toolbox, scattering its contents across the floor. I sighed and put down the box I was holding to clean up the mess. As I was picking up the tools, I noticed Floki had found a new source of entertainment, a roll of duct tape. He was batting it around with his paws, and before I could stop him, he had managed to unravel a good portion of it. Ludi, seeing his brother having fun, decided to join in and started chasing the loose end of the tape. In the midst of this chaos, I realized that I had left the garage door wide open, and the wind was starting to pick up. Leaves were blowing into the garage, and Floki and Ludi were getting even more excited, pouncing on the moving leaves and bits of debris. I quickly closed the garage door to prevent any more leaves from coming in, but the damage was already done. As I tried to regain some control over the situation, I heard another noise, this time coming from the rafters above. I looked up to see a small squirrel that had somehow found its way into the garage. Floki and Ludi immediately noticed the squirrel as well, and their eyes lit up with excitement. The squirrel, clearly just as startled as I was, started darting around the rafters looking for a way out. Floki, never one to back down from a challenge, leapt onto a nearby shelf and started climbing towards the rafters. Ludi followed closely behind, and soon both cats were precariously perched on the shelf, swatting at the squirrel. I knew I had to act quickly before things got even more out of hand. I grabbed a broom and gently tried to coax the squirrel towards the open window. The squirrel, understandably frightened, was hesitant to move, but eventually it started making its way towards the window. Floki and Ludi were still trying to get closer, but I managed to keep them at bay with the broom. Finally, the squirrel made a dash for the window and escaped into the yard. Floki and Ludi, now deprived of their new playmate, looked disappointed, but quickly turned their attention back to the garage. I closed the window and took a deep breath, relieved that the squirrel was safe and the immediate chaos was over. With the garage door closed and the squirrel gone, I turned my attention back to cleaning up. Floki and Ludi, still full of energy, resumed their exploration. Floki found an old tennis ball and started batting it around, while Ludi discovered a box of holiday decorations and began pawing at the tinsel. Despite the mess and the unexpected excitement, I couldn't help but smile at their antics. They had turned what was supposed to be a mundane chore into a memorable adventure. Watching them play and explore reminded me of why I love having them around, even when they create a bit of chaos. As the afternoon wore on, Floki and Ludi eventually tired themselves out and curled up in a sunny spot on the garage floor. I finished cleaning up and took a moment to sit down and enjoy the peacefulness. The garage was now organized and my two furry companions were content and resting. That day was a perfect example of how Floki and Ludi can turn any situation into an entertaining and heartwarming experience. Their playful nature and boundless curiosity never fail to bring joy and laughter into my life. Whether they're chasing squirrels or just exploring their surroundings, every moment with them is an adventure. So here's to Floki and Ludi, my little troublemakers, who always manage to make life interesting and fun. I wouldn't trade these moments for anything, and I'm grateful for the joy they bring into my life every day. I've got another amusing tale about my two mischievous cats, Floki and Ludi. This particular adventure happened last spring, on a day when I decided to do some DIY projects around the house. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, and I was in the mood to finally tackle the painting of the living room. I had bought some lovely pastel paint colors and all the necessary supplies: brushes, rollers, painter's tape, and plastic sheets to protect the furniture. I started by moving the furniture to the center of the room and covering it with the plastic sheet. Floki and Ludi, of course, were very curious about what was going on and followed me around, inspecting every move. As I began taping off the edges of the walls, Floki found the roll of painter's tape absolutely fascinating. He started batting at it, and before long, he had managed to unroll a significant portion of it, tangling himself up in the process. Ludi, not wanting to be left out, pounced on Floki, and the two of them ended up rolling around the floor covered in blue tape. I couldn't help but laugh at their antics, but I knew I had to get them out of the room if I wanted to get any painting done. I gently untangled Floki and Ludi from the tape and carried them to the bedroom, closing the door behind them. With the cats safely out of the way, I returned to my painting. Everything was going smoothly for a while. I had managed to paint most of one wall when I heard a commotion coming from the bedroom. Curious, I went to check on Floki and Ludi. To my surprise, they had managed to open the closet door and had pulled out a box of old clothes. They were having a blast, rolling around in the pile of clothes and creating a big mess. I decided it was best to leave them there and quickly returned to my painting. Just as I was finishing up the first coat, I felt a presence behind me. I turned around to see Floki with a streak of pastel blue paint on his fur, sitting proudly in the middle of the living room. Ludi was right behind him, also sporting some paint on his whiskers. They had somehow escaped the bedroom and decided to join me again. I sighed and put down the roller, knowing that my painting project was once again on hold. I picked up Floki and Ludi and brought them to the bathroom for a quick cleanup. Trying to wash paint off a cat is no easy task, especially when you have two of them. Floki wriggled and squirmed while Ludi tried to climb out of the sink. By the time I was done, I was almost as wet as they were. With the cats clean and dried, I decided to take a break and have some lunch. Floki and Ludi followed me to the kitchen, seemingly unfazed by their little adventure. As I prepared a sandwich, they sat on the counter, watching my every move. I couldn't help but laugh at their persistence and curiosity. After lunch, I decided to give painting another try. This time, I put Floki and Ludi in the backyard to play. They loved being outside and immediately started chasing each other around the garden. With them safely occupied, I returned to the living room and resumed painting. Things were going well until I heard a loud crash from the backyard. My heart sank as I rushed outside to see what had happened. There, in the middle of the garden, was the remains of a clay pot that had once held my favorite plant. Floki and Ludi were sitting nearby, looking innocent but clearly the culprits. They had knocked over the pot during one of their playful chases. I cleaned up the mess and decided that maybe it was time to call it a day. I had managed to get most of the painting done, and despite the interruptions, it had been an entertaining day. I brought Floki and Ludi back inside and settled down on the couch with them. They curled up beside me, purring contentedly as if nothing had happened. That day was a perfect reminder of how life with Floki and Ludi is never boring. Their endless curiosity and playful nature always keep me on my toes, turning even the most mundane tasks into memorable adventures. Whether they're getting tangled in tape, covered in paint, or knocking over plants, they always manage to bring a smile to my face. So here's to Floki and Ludi, my little troublemakers, who make every day an adventure. Life with them may be chaotic at times, but it's also filled with joy and laughter. I wouldn't have it any other way. I've got a hilariously chaotic story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. This one took place during the holiday season when I decided to set up a Christmas tree for the first time since adopting them. It was a chilly December evening, and I was filled with festive spirit. I hauled out the big box containing the artificial Christmas tree and all the decorations from the attic. As soon as I opened the box, Floki and Ludi were instantly drawn to the scene, their eyes wide with curiosity and excitement. I started assembling the tree, and naturally, Floki Floki decided that the branches were the perfect new playground. He began climbing up the half-assembled tree, swatting at the branches and getting tangled in the fake pine needles. Ludi, not wanting to miss out on the fun, started chasing the pieces of tinsel I had laid out on the floor. With Floki perched precariously on the branches and Ludi making a mess with the decorations, I realized this was going to be more challenging than I had anticipated. I gently lifted Floki off the tree and tried to distract him with one of his favorite toys. It worked for a few minutes, giving me just enough time to finish setting up the tree. Once the tree was up and standing, it looked magnificent, tall, full, and ready to be decorated. I started hanging the ornaments, and Floki and Ludi watched intently. Floki's eyes followed each shiny bauble I placed on the tree, and before long, he couldn't resist the temptation. He leapt onto the tree, swatting at the ornaments and sending a few crashing to the floor. Ludi, seeing Floki having fun, decided to join in. He started batting at the ornaments from the bottom, and soon the tree was shaking with the combined efforts of both cats. I tried to salvage what I could, picking up the fallen ornaments and gently scolding the cats, but they were too excited to care. After a few minutes of chaos, I managed to get Floki and Ludi away from the tree and decided to take a break. I thought a little snack might calm them down, so I headed to the kitchen to prepare some treats. As I was busy in the kitchen, I heard a loud crash from the living room. My heart sank as I rushed back to find the tree lying on the floor, with Floki and Ludi sitting amidst the wreckage, looking both guilty and proud. I sighed and decided that maybe a smaller tree would be a better idea. I cleaned up the mess and set up a small tabletop tree, hoping it would be less enticing for the cats. To my relief, they seemed less interested in the smaller tree and soon moved on to other distractions. With the tree finally safe, I resumed decorating. I hung the remaining ornaments and added some lights, careful to keep them out of reach of curious paws. The living room looked cozy and festive, and I was finally able to sit back and enjoy the holiday atmosphere. That evening, I sat on the couch with a cup of hot cocoa, watching the twinkling lights on the tree. Floki and Ludi had finally calmed down and were curled up beside me, purring contentedly. Despite the earlier chaos, it had turned into a wonderfully festive evening. The next morning, I woke up to find Floki and Ludi had discovered the joys of playing with wrapping paper. They had found a roll of wrapping paper I had left out and had unrolled it across the living room, turning it into their personal playground. They were having the time of their lives, pouncing on the paper and chasing each other through the crinkly maze. I couldn't help but laugh at their antics. I grabbed my phone and started recording them, capturing their playful energy and the mess they had created. It was one of those moments that perfectly captured the joy and chaos of living with cats. As the holiday season continued, Floki and Ludi kept me entertained with their endless curiosity and playful spirit. They helped me wrap presents, often stealing bows and ribbons, and loved watching the snowflakes fall outside the window. Every day brought new adventures and laughs, making that Christmas one of the most memorable I've ever had. In the end, Floki and Ludi reminded me that the holidays are about more than just perfect decorations and orderly celebrations. They're about joy, laughter, and the special moments we share with our loved ones, furry or otherwise. So here's to Floki and Ludi, my little holiday helpers who made that Christmas truly unforgettable. No matter how many ornaments they knock over or how many times they topple the tree, I wouldn't trade these moments for anything. Life with them is an adventure, and I'm grateful for every minute of it. I've got another hilarious and memorable story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi. This particular adventure took place entirely inside our home, on a day that started out as a typical lazy Sunday. It was a chilly winter morning, and I was lounging on the couch with a cup of hot coffee, enjoying the quiet start to the day. Floki and Ludi were also in their usual spots. Floki was perched on the windowsill, watching the world outside, while Ludi was curled up on his favorite blanket on the floor. I had planned to spend the day doing some light cleaning and maybe catching up on a book I'd been wanting to read. Little did I know, Floki and Ludi had other plans. Around mid-morning, I decided to start with some laundry. I gathered the dirty clothes and headed to the laundry room. As I was sorting the clothes, I noticed Floki had followed me and was now sitting on top of the washing machine, looking down at the open laundry basket with great interest. Ludi soon joined him, and the two of them started pawing at the clothes inside. I chuckled and gently shooed them away so I could load the washing machine. With the laundry started, I moved on to vacuuming the living room. This is where things started to get interesting. Floki and Ludi are not big fans of the vacuum cleaner. The moment I turned it on, they both darted out of the room, their tails puffed up in alarm. I continued vacuuming, thinking they would eventually calm down and return, but instead, they decided to take their revenge on the noisy intruder. As I vacuumed the hallway, I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. I turned off the vacuum and walked over to investigate, only to find Flocky and Ludi on the kitchen counter, batting around a roll of paper towels they had managed to unravel. The kitchen floor was now covered in a sea of white paper. I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of my two troublemakers. I cleaned up the mess and gave them a few toys to keep them occupied, hoping they would leave the paper towels alone. But of course, Flocky and Ludi had other ideas. As I resumed my cleaning, I noticed the sound of tiny paws running up and down the stairs. I looked over to see Flocky and Ludi chasing each other, clearly having the time of their lives. They zoomed around the house, leaping over furniture and skidding across the floors, creating a ruckus that echoed through the rooms. At one point, Flocky took a sharp turn and ended up sliding into a stack of magazines I had left on the coffee table. The magazines went flying, and Floki looked momentarily stunned before shaking it off and continuing the chase. Ludi, seeing the opportunity, pounced on Floki, and the two of them ended up rolling around on the floor, playfully wrestling. I decided to take a break from cleaning and watch them for a bit, amused by their endless energy and antics. It was impossible to be upset with them. They were having so much fun, and their joy was infectious. After a while, the cats seemed to tire out and settled down for a nap. I took advantage of the quiet moment to start preparing lunch. As I chopped vegetables in the kitchen, I felt a pair of eyes on me. I looked up to see Floki and Ludi sitting at the edge of the counter, watching my every move with intense curiosity. I decided to give them a little treat and cut up a small piece of cooked chicken for each of them. They eagerly gobbled it up, purring in satisfaction. Feeling a bit more energized, they then turned their attention to the sink, where they spotted the water running. Floki, always the braver of the two, reached out a paw to bat at the stream of water. He quickly pulled back, shaking his paw, but the curiosity was too strong, and he kept reaching out to touch the water. Ludi, not to be outdone, jumped up onto the counter and started batting at the water as well. Before I knew it, water was splashing everywhere, and the two cats were having a blast. I quickly turned off the tap and wiped up the mess, laughing at their antics. With lunch ready and the kitchen somewhat cleaned up, I sat down to eat, and Floki and Ludi finally seemed to settle down, each finding a cozy spot to nap. The afternoon continued with more of their playful mischief. They discovered a box of Christmas decorations I had left out and had a great time batting around the ornaments and unraveling the strings of lights. I decided to join in the fun and played with them, dangling a shiny ornament on a string for them to chase. By the end of the day, the house was a bit messier than when I had started, but it was filled with laughter and the joyful memories of Flocky and Ludi's antics. They may be little troublemakers, but their playful spirit and endless curiosity make every day an adventure. That lazy Sunday turned out to be one of the most entertaining and heartwarming days I've had with Floki and Ludi. Their ability to find joy in the simplest things and their boundless energy remind me of the importance of play and laughter. Whether they're chasing each other around the house, unrolling paper towels, or splashing in the sink, they always manage to bring a smile to my face. So here's to Floki and Ludi, my little partners in crime, who turn even the most mundane days into unforgettable adventures. Life with them is never boring, and I'm grateful for every hilarious moment they bring into my life. I've got a short but hilarious story about my two cats, Floki and Ludi, that happened just a few weeks ago. It was a typical weekday evening, and I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Floki and Ludi were, as usual, curiously watching my every move from their favorite perch on the kitchen counter. I was chopping vegetables when I accidentally dropped a piece of broccoli on the floor. Before I could pick it up, Floki pounced on it, batting it around like it was the most exciting toy he had ever seen. Ludi, not wanting to be left out, quickly joined in. The two of them chased the broccoli piece all over the kitchen, sliding across the tile floor and occasionally crashing into each other. They were so engrossed in their game that they didn't notice when the broccoli piece rolled under the refrigerator. Undeterred, Floki stretched his paw under the fridge, trying to retrieve the lost toy. Ludi, watching intently, decided to help by sticking his paw under the fridge as well. The two of them looked like a pair of synchronized swimmers, each trying to fish out the broccoli piece. I couldn't help but laugh at their determination and teamwork. Eventually, I decided to help them out. I grabbed a broom and gently nudged the broccoli piece out from under the fridge. Floki and Ludi immediately pounced on it, resuming their game with renewed enthusiasm. Dinner preparations were temporarily put on hold as I watched my two mischievous cats turn a simple piece of broccoli into the highlight of their evening. Their playful antics never failed to bring a smile to my face and remind me of the joy they bring into my life every day.